Today's date is October 4, 2015. This is Yalak Emmet once again, and I just uploaded the lesson number 11 entitled, well, it's part of the New Testament is Fake series. It's lesson 11 entitled Clever Introduction, which is saying that the New Testament book, the New Testament writing and stories in it about Jesus and the apostles and the works that they did and the epistles that came after was a real clever introduction, meaning it's a clever, smart way to introduce the Christian religion, which is, from what I can tell, a pagan religion. And it's actually not up properly yet. It's still, I'm looking at the screen, I'm still uploading it. But just some information popped at me quickly, so I just wanted to throw in this mainly history to again show some of the things that I'm saying, how the Israelites were really being tricked, right? And the Roman Empire was also being tricked with just another religion popping up from all the other religions and cults that were in the Roman Empire. This one is geared a little bit differently, more forcefully towards the Israelites, although it was going to affect others. Remember from the times of the Greeks, right? Antiochus, and you've heard of some of the history of the Maccabees and so on. Back in those times before the supposed time of Jesus coming, that they're basically saying to the Jews at the time, the Hebrews, that they need to get rid of their laws, stop keeping the Sabbath, start worshiping on Sunday, eating pork, get rid of their holy days and so on. And they brought them into some of the cults that they had at that time. And so the Jews, more properly the Hebrews, had to join in to some extent into these cults that were being forced on them, because the Most High wasn't protecting them in the same way anymore as in the past because of their transgressions. And so you find that they were getting into some of the different cults that later became more popular in Rome, in the Roman Empire. So, but even though you see the Hebrews resisting it, they still to some extent got involved in it because they were forced. Some just gave in and others were forced more heavily at the point of the sword, right? And some were killed and so on. So to some extent they got into some of these things to save their lives, right? But as I pointed out in lesson 11, the Hebrews were always resisting the Greeks and the Romans, their thinking, their way of life and so on, right? And so they would pull back out, or they wouldn't be fully in their heart thrown into these cults and these religions. So what happened in the Roman Empire now is that they actually decided, we need to get these people with a better effort. Instead of just giving them this cult or that cult and forcing them to drop their laws and their customs and so on and to take on these new beliefs, which will solidify their, for want of a better way of putting it, their curse, and that the Most High is not protecting them properly because they're doing these other cults. We need to make something that more closely resembles what they were doing under Moses and under the prophets Elijah and so on, right? We need to get them a kind of cult or religion that tells them it is the same as what they were always instructed to do under Moses. Since we can't put the Most High before them, we'll tell them he had a son. Because, as I pointed out before, a son in the mind of the Hebrews and in the ancient world would represent the father in different ways. Basically, it's like if you were dealing with the son in certain matters of business and government and so on, it's like you were really dealing with the father. So he was like as real a representation of the father as you could get. certainly more so than just a friend or an acquaintance or another business partner that was working along with the father. The son was usually raised up to take over what the father was doing. So it's no wonder that you find stuff in the New Testament like, I and my father are one. They're basically putting Jesus where he needs to be, in a place where you can equate him with the Father. So the scripture says, Philippians chapter 2, he thought it not robbery to be equal with God, right? So now you can begin to understand some of these things. So I'm going to be giving some more history to show how they were doing this stuff and how the Hebrews were resisting it. And this is going to be historical further, adding to it, because this isn't just like obviously you can see from the other videos, this isn't just a one video teaching where you teach for a half an hour or for 2 hours and everything you want to say. Of course, you're going to have people out there who still believe in Jesus, even of the Israelites, and still will continue teaching that. Because I'm not going to fix everything. You're not going to fix everything. The Most High says when he gathers us, then we shall all know him, which means the closer we get to the end is the more we're going to find doctrines are being cleared up, and we're going to find out more deception that we have taken on and believed by those who tricked us and by our forefathers who entered into some of them willingly anyway. Right? So the closer we get to the end is the more some of these things we believe, and we're like, yeah, I'm an Israelite, I believe this, I believe that, and whatever. We're going to find, oh, no, that wasn't a part of Israel, and we were tricked, right? So, and they shall all know me means we're going to look at some of the long-standing beliefs that we've had all our lives, and we're going to realize that they were beliefs placed upon us from our captors. They came from deception to keep us asleep, to dumb us down, and to keep us, in the dark. So when the Most High gathers us and is bringing us back in the land, wilderness, everything like that, we're going to learn more and more. Even the holy days, we're going to start to learn more about them as it gets closer to the end. More about them and learn more close. I mean, like, think of it, just for the holy days before I really move on with the lesson. We all know that what we understand at the holy days today what we know is just our best effort, and there's great information out there, great teaching and so on, and we're all happy. Some of us are participating in them more than others. Some says, oh, you can't even touch them, don't bother deal with them, whatever, right now, because we're not back in the land and we're not restored yet, and so on and so forth, right? But for those of us who do keep them or remember them as much as we can, when we're actually back in the land and the kingdom is restored, we're going to learn and know so much more and participate in the holy days, the keeping of them, so much more vividly. The information will come to us that we're going to say, man, back in America, back in the Americas, we thought we knew the holy days. We didn't. This is it. Because why? We're going to be reconnected back in a dynamic way with what our forefathers were doing under Moses and the other prophets and so on, right? Now, if I'm wrong on a point or two here or there, I'd like you to help me, because I'm still learning as I go, right? But you can clearly see that the main points I'm making are really hitting at this stuff to show, from scripture and history, how there is a serious problem with this Son of God. The Most High didn't have a Son of God sitting up in heaven beside him that he sent down here. In one of the lessons I said, the Most High is looking for someone to come and fix this problem. And he couldn't see anyone. He couldn't see anyone to fix a problem, so he came himself, right? So I just don't understand how it is, because we're saying at some level this Son of God must be the Most High himself, because he's a part of the Elohim or the Elohim, right? No matter how much you want to split it and say he's a certain part of it, it still ends up equaling him. So couldn't he see all along that there's a part of him, being his son, that was sitting on his right hand, that could take care of this? All right, so I'm gonna get into it here, and I just want to thank all the listeners who have been listening to my videos, and I'm on Twitter. You can look me up there as well, Yalak Emmett. That's where I mostly uh, give my tidbits from. So all the brothers and sisters who are following me and who I follow, who are listening to this stuff, giving consideration to it, and who help to sharpen me with their questions and their rebuttals and so on. Thanks to all of you, and this is just my effort to help all of us. You help me, I help you to figure out all of what it means to be Israel until the Most High really gathers us. And I'm not one of those people who are telling you if you don't believe in Jesus, you're going to hell and so on. I know there are some people out there teaching that. That's not what I think. I just think that um, I think that we're in captivity because of the transgressions of our fathers, and we have continued some of those same transgressions by worshiping idols and other gods and so on. I think that we were just deceived, and we're doing a lot of things that we shouldn't be doing, and so we're unlearning these things. We're unlearning these things, and this is one of the things that I really think that we need to unlearn. So I'm not condemning any Hebrew camp. You'll hear me mentioning from time to time. What I don't do, though, is mention the names of the Hebrew camps. Now, maybe some point in the future I might have a reason I feel to mention a certain name or so, but it wouldn't be to try to curse them specifically. It might more be for reference with something that they said that I need to compare or so. But of course, you can tell I'm not cursing any camp specifically, like I just hate the camps. I've learned from all the camps. I love all the camps, and I'm thankful for what they're doing and so on. Right? I'm just saying camps in general that they need to reconsider and so on. All right, so this first set of bit of information I'm going to give here is from the Virtual Jewish World. That's a website you can find at virtualjewishlibrary.org. And I hope I'll remember to put the link up for where I got this actual document from. This is going into some more history now of what we're seeing happening around the times that all this stuff is coming up about Jesus, Son of God, New Testament church and apostles and so on. The last one, lesson 11, I gave quite a bit of scriptures. This one, it's mainly, history. But I'm going to mention Acts chapter 2 for sure. All right, so Virtual Jewish World, Rome, Italy is the title of this document here. It goes on saying the Jewish community in Rome, and I like I said before in the last video, I'd more say the Hebrew community, right? Or the Judahites, if we are saying that it was Judah that was there, left, as the other 10 tribes were scattered. But I just say Hebrew. So a lot of this stuff, if I forget to mention, when I say Jewish community, I'm usually meaning the Hebrew community. All right? The Hebrew community in Rome is known to be the oldest community in Europe and also the oldest continuous Jewish settlements in the world, dating back to the 1st century BCE. So there might be some confusion there because they might say, part of that, because they mentioned Europe, might be dealing with the modern Jews or the Israelis and so on. But that's hardly the point that I'm trying to get at, because whether we're clear or not about that part, I'm dealing with the actual inception of the Christian religion. So as I go down to closer to what I want here, it's dealing now under the subtitle, The Classical Period. It says, the Hebrew community in Rome is known to be the oldest community in Europe. I read that already. Jewish settlements in the world dating back to 161 BCE. Of course, we know our people were around in that time, right? You can see a lot of history from this if you read the Apocrypha as well. You're going to get some of this information of what was going on because they took that out of the, they call that the Intertestament period, right? That about a few hundred years between the Old and New Testament. When Jason Ben Eliezer, okay, I don't want that. Okay, after the Romans invaded Judea in 63 BCE, Jewish prisoners or I would say here, Hebrew prisoners of war were brought to Rome as slaves. So we were brought into the Roman Empire as slaves, right? The Hebrew delegates came to Rome on diplomatic mission. And remember, they were dealing with certain ones of us on that level, right? Because there had to be a representative of our nation as well, right? So they would come to Rome on missions. And Hebrew merchants also traveled to Rome seeking business opportunities. Many of those who visited Rome stayed, and the Hebrew population began to grow. The Ark of Titus was built by the Roman commander to commemorate his Judean victory in 70 CE. It shows the triumphal parade with the temple vessels carried aloft. Now hear this next point. This is where it's going to start to pick up now with some nice history. While the treatment of the Hebrews by the Romans in what they're calling Palestine now was often harsh, so the Hebrews weren't being treated well. That's what they're saying, right? They're slaves, right? Relations with the rulers in Rome were generally much better. Julius Caesar, for example. And that's probably why we've heard so much about him, right? He was known, this Caesar, to be a friend of the Jews, they're saying, or a friend of the Hebrews. He allowed them to settle anywhere in the Roman Empire. According to historians, when Caesar was assassinated by Brutus in 44 BCE, the Jews spent day and night at Caesar's tomb weeping over his death. Weeping over his death. Now, his successor, Augustus, also acted favorably toward the Hebrews and even scheduled his grain distribution so that it would not interfere with the Jewish Sabbath. Now, here, my point here. I was telling you in other videos that the Christian religion was a different thing going on from the Hebrew way of life. The Jews didn't start no Christianity. You had the Christian religion, which was existing in operation at the same time as the Hebrews were still keeping their laws, even though they might not have been keeping it as perfectly or as properly as they did in ancient times, before the prophets started coming out and cursing at them and saying you're going astray and so on, right? They might not have been doing it as properly, but they still were keeping things intact. Why do you think you have all this stuff about the temple and Herod building temple and all that kind of stuff? Because they weren't going to no Christian church. So he was helping them out with a temple. You see that? If they had started the Christian religion and they got the Holy Ghost outpouring, day of Pentecost and all, and Peter preaching and everything and the apostles, if they were starting the Christian religion and had started it, wouldn't they have been going to church? No, it's the Christians and the pagans who were going to church, the Christian church. And we know that when Constantine and them were really starting up this stuff, what they did was the first Christian church services weren't held in no synagogues with the Hebrews. They were having those Christian services initially in pagan temples of Zeus and other pagan deities. So when Christians, like when I was in a Christian church, we say we want to get back to our roots. Christians don't really know the roots most of the time. I didn't either. I didn't realize that. So when I was sitting there in a Christian church, preaching, going to Bible school, preaching, traveling around, preaching, all that kind of stuff, back to my roots I was just so done with the whole thing, so knowledgeable that I didn't understand. I'm saying I want to go back to the pagan temples of Zeus, where our roots began. I understand this is going to infuriate some people. I've already, yeah, they've already cussed me out real good already, and all kinds of stuff has gone bad, right? But these things still need to be taught. So it was something different from what the Hebrews were doing. They were focused on their synagogue, on their temple, on the laws of Moses. They wanted to get back to the time before they fell into transgressions and the Most High sent them under the power of the other nations, right? They wanted to get back to that. They weren't into this Christian stuff. Twice in the classic period, the Hebrews were exiled from Rome in 19 CE and in 49 to 50 CE. The first exile took place due to the defrauding of an aristocratic Roman woman, Fulvia, who had been attracted to Judaism. Attracted to Judaism. Remember, other people who were not of the Israelites liked what was going on, right? Remember, even the Queen of Sheba was interested in the fame of Solomon, and it says, in the name of his God, right? And certainly through time as well, we find that the Herods, their families, and others around them began to learn the ways of the Jews or the Hebrews. And the Israelites had at one point forcefully converted some of these other pagan nations, right? Dealing with the Greeks and so on, right? In order to not kill them, because they fought and they killed them, but they said, convert to our God and worship the Most High and so on and whatever, right? Show some respect for our God and for our ways and so on. Convert, right? And we won't kill you. And so some of them did. So that's how you get Judaism, in part coming up. Judaism is not what the Israelites were doing, right? These other people who learned our ways, they then learned our laws and from our books, holy books and so on, and made a religion out of it, and then now eventually grew in power to take us over and have taken our identity. And now we're being told that we are the Hamites, we are the pagans, we are the Gentiles, and what's good for us is Christianity. We need to choose Christianity to be, to be saved, or take the 7 laws of Noah or something like that, So you find other people converting in, right? Just like this woman, Fulvia, she was attracted to what they're calling here Judaism, right? But I noticed that while they're saying this stuff about all these people, that's how they're bringing it to us. But they're not making things more clear, like they were attracted to keeping the holy days. They were attracted to the law of Moses. They don't put it in ways like that. Why? They might have had some attraction and some feelings towards it, but they were in no way, leading up to the Caesars and so on, going to fully embrace with their heart the God of Israel. They were always on the outskirts. Of course they admired these people, because this was the power people on the earth that the Most High used to take down and punish other nations. And they were the only nation to have so consistently and in such a dynamic manner had the display of the power of the Most High and revelation from the Most High. So even captors who captured them, it was like a victory for them to publish that and whatever, because look what we did. We took down the Israelites. They're serving in our kingdom. They're our saviors. It was a big deal for them. It's like if you were if you're watching a Superman movie and somebody captured Superman like this Lex Luthor guy, it was a big thing. He was happy because, yeah, he took down Superman. I got him chained up with kryptonite. Right? The second exile occurred because of disturbances caused by the rise of Christianity. See that? You see what the history is bringing out? The second exile happened because of disturbances caused by the rise of Christianity. Rise. So here it is. You got this aristocratic woman, Fulvia, attracted to Judaism, but you have also shown that it was something separate from Christianity. But you have also, on the other side of things, Christianity, this new kid on the block religion, was rising up at the same time while people like her were being attracted to the Hebrew way of life, or to the Hebrew worship system, right, for want of a better word. So I'm showing here that history is bringing out what we didn't always consider in the Christian church, for which reason we came over to the knowledge that we are the Israelites, and now beginning to deal with our Syndrome 174 problem from Jeremiah 17:4. You're going to be disconnected from your heritage, from your knowledge of yourself and who you are in your God, right? We didn't know this in the Christian church. So what we did was, once we found out that we're the Israelites now, linking back to the slaves that were taken on the slave ships and so on, we and sold all over the place, we brought over enough of those Christian teachings which we still need to shed, right? Some of these things, the ancient Hebrews weren't doing them. And I've asked and pointed out many times, was Obadiah and Jeremiah professing Jesus and praying to Jesus and so on, right? Even if you call him by a Hebrew name. Ezra and them, they fasted by the river, right? I think that's Ezra 8:21. Looking for the Most High, not looking for his son. If his son was all about deliverance, then, why weren't they praying to the son, or why weren't they asking? Why didn't the son just simply just jump in and say to the father, I'll take care of it. My job is deliverance because I'm a great deliverer. I am, I'm the savior anyway. Ezra 8:21. Then I proclaimed a fast there at the river of Ahava, that we might afflict ourselves before our God, to seek of him a right way for us, and for our little ones, and for all our substance. Right? To seek of him, before our God, to seek of him a right way for us. Nothing here in these kinds of verses, when they're seeking the Most High, is showing any duality in their prayer. As far as I see, all these kinds of verses where they're seeking the Most High for this and that, and they've got some problem and they need some salvation, some deliverance, or whatever, right? They're doing, whatever they're dealing with. It doesn't show some duality of people up in heaven who are a part of the Godhead, as they say in the Christian church, or the Elohim or Elohim, or the Elohim. It shows a singularity of focus in their prayers. They're praying to him, the Most High, the God that brought them out of Egypt, the one that Moses spoke of, right? This duality of thinking came in later with corruption to bring in a Son of God. So there was this rise of Christianity going on at the same time when the Hebrews were still doing their thing, trying to find a way to keep their laws, right? Waiting for the time when the Most High would gather them back. It is not certain, though, that these measures were fully carried out, or that the period of exile lasted a long time. During the Roman-Jewish or the Roman-Hebrew wars in Palestine in 66 to 73 and 132 to 135, Hebrew prisoners of war, the Judahites, were brought to Rome as slaves. A number of the oldest Hebrew Roman families trace their ancestry in the city to this period. Hebrew scholars from Israel came to Rome in 95 to 96. In 212, Caracalla granted the Hebrews the privilege of becoming Roman citizens. So things are moving on there, right? From the second half of the 1st century CE, the Roman Hebrew community became firmly established. A majority of the community were shopkeepers, craftsmen, peddlers, and so on. But other Hebrews became poets, physicians, and actors, satiric poets of the time, right? They're not saying that they became pastors and missionaries and all that kind of stuff. Evidence has been found that 12 synagogues were functioning during this period, although not at the same time. Unfortunately, none of those synagogues have been preserved, right? So they were destroyed. So during this time, right? So from the time of the 66, that's not too long after Christ is said to have ascended into heaven, right? Up until 135, right? And these are the times when some of the apostles were still alive, right? So they're saying evidence has been found that 12 of the synagogues were functioning, which means that they weren't going to no Christian church. They were dealing with their synagogues, right? Okay, now with the Christian Empire. Okay, I printed this stuff. Okay, just to summarize this point here, the Hebrew position in Rome began to deteriorate during the reign of Constantine the Great from 306 to 336 AD. And around that time is coming up the Council of Nicaea, right? Which the main thing they really told us in the Christian church was just a 1 or 2 sentence thing about the Godhead. But there's so much more happened, right? Constantine, who enacted laws limiting the rights of the Hebrews as citizens. So if they were Christians, why were they being singled out like this? No, it's because they were Hebrews who were meaning to keep to their laws and didn't want any part of this new Christian pagan religion or any of the other pagan religions of Rome. So they were still a threat to the empire because they weren't willing to sell out completely. They were still trying to maintain. So their rights as citizens were being pulled from them now. They're still being treated in a way that showed that they were different. The Jewish synagogues were destroyed by Christian mobs. Are you hearing this? Destroyed by Christian mobs. Why? It was something different that was going on. You got the Hebrews there that were keeping to their way, and then you got the new Christian religion that was coming up. I told you around the time of this aristocratic woman, Fulvia, right? Who was attracted to the Hebrew system of worship. So you got that going on, and at that time the Christian religion was coming up, and the Christian mobs in 387 to 388 destroyed the Hebrew synagogues. Right? Why? Because they were fighting against these people who were hitting out against the law. They didn't want to have any part of it. They were like, no, people, if you're going to say you're following this God, you need to follow the laws of Moses, right? So they destroyed, the Christian mobs destroyed the synagogues of the Hebrews. So you got Hebrew synagogues and Christian temples and Christian churches operating at the same time. It was the Christian religion was a religion that was operating at the time when the Hebrews were doing their same old stuff from Moses. They're two different and separate things. It's not that the Hebrews became no Christians on the day of Pentecost starting the church. The church of Pentecost and all that getting tongues, speaking in tongues. No. When Rome was captured by Vandals in 455, spoils of the Jerusalem temple were taken to Africa. You see, spoils of the Christian churches? No, spoils of the Jerusalem temple. Why? The Hebrews were always the focus of antagonism and of anger and so on, right? They were always being hit. They wanted to get rid of them because they were doing something different and weren't trying to assimilate fully in their heart with Rome. To some extent, of course, they did because they had to live there. But in their heart, they were always drawn to the Most High. Remember, especially when you read in the book of Judges, even just the first couple chapters of the book of Judges, let's say if you read from Judges chapter 1 to chapter 5 or 6, you see a number of times there where the children of Israel were going the wrong way and, getting into idolatry and so on. And the Most High would punish them. But because in their heart they were drawn to the Most High, they would always be coming back. So Rome couldn't find a way to keep these people, just like everybody else couldn't find a way to keep these people permanently with them. The Hebrews were given the word of the Most High. And his word says, my word does not return to me void. So if he invested something in the Hebrew Israelites, he's going to get something back. So that which was deposited or placed in them is always going to pull them back to the Most High, even when they go astray. This is why after captivity, and we've been in captive lands for so long, a couple of thousand years now, that we still have prophecies left that says that we're going to be drawn back and be gathered back. Why? He invested something in us, and his word will not return unto him void. So his word is going to return with the Israelites that he chose to put into the land that he chose where he placed his name. So it don't matter which religion you get in, it's wrong, yeah, but in terms of returning in your heart to the Most High, it doesn't matter which religion you get in, you are always going to have something that's tugging at you. If you're an Israelite, that's saying you need to return, wake up, smarten up. You need to get back to who you really are. It's a curse why you don't know who you are. Syndrome 174, Jeremiah 17 verse 4, look it up. It's always going to be pulling at us. And so you find that the Greeks couldn't control us. Now the Romans and the Roman Empire, they couldn't control us. So they came at us, destroying the temple, whatever, right? Because we weren't giving into any of these religions, and certainly not the new Christian religion, which was on the rise about this time, when there was a so-called Son of God that came to give them salvation with grace and mercy. Even though I showed in lesson 11 right before this, which was just uploaded, I'm looking at the screen now, it's been uploaded, that the Most High said he removed his mercy and his long suffering and his grace from them. So because he removed it, how is the Son going to come and give you this grace and mercy, right? And show you that grace and mercy when the Most High said he removed it. Basically, he's saying you're not going to get back that grace and mercy until I gather you. Since we're not gathered yet, no Son can come and give you that. Because the same Son of God says, if Satan is divided against his own kingdom, won't it fall? It will topple. So how can the kingdom of the Most High, or the kingdom of heaven, have the Father send his Son to come and give you grace and mercy 2,000 years ago, when the Father said you're not going to have that grace and mercy that I've removed from you until I restore you and gather you back, which hasn't happened as yet. Because you remember, we still have there's still more stuff to go on in prophecy, right? All right, let's move on. Once Christianity became the official religion, and you see how they're writing this here, because they know the history, right? Again, this is from Virtual Jewish World at jewishvirtuallibrary.org, right? And so not only them, but other historians are showing, other books and other writings are showing here that by destroying the Jerusalem temple and by going after the synagogues and the Hebrews, it would help Christianity rise, because they needed to get rid of the threat, right, against this Christian religion that the Hebrews were going to be condemning. Because think of it, if you've got this new religion, Christianity, coming up, and they are teaching about the Son of God and praying to this person named Jesus, who Moses did not pray to. Even for those of us in the Israelite camps who want to say he is God's son, but we know that his name is a Hebrew word. Even for those of us who think that, then the Hebrews at that time would have been like, no. Since the Most High said we should search back to our fathers, and when we search back to our fathers, we don't see them praying to some man that had a certain name that we say is the son of the God of Israel. So the Israelites would have been hit not against it, right? That's why they needed to neutralize doctrinal threat, then, if I can put it that way, that would be coming against this new Christianity that was on the rise. Most of the Once Christianity became the official religion of the Roman Empire, emperors further limited the civil and political rights of the Jews. So now, if the Jews or if the Hebrews were the ones who started Christianity, why are they going to limit the civil and political rights of the Hebrews, who made them get such a great religion that was going to give them power over the world to this day, where they're owning most of the major corporations and banks and credit companies worldwide? Why? At least then if you say, well, it's because now they rose to power, so they're going to take it over from them so that they can control it and so that the Hebrews won't control the religion anymore. Well, I mean, if that is the case, then why don't they at least, if they're taking over the so-called religion from the Hebrews who supposedly started this Christian religion, why don't they at least keep them at the forefront of it so that at least they can use them like puppets to build their stuff, to continue to propagate the Christian religion? If they did it so well, why take it over and remove them from it? It will only crash. Take it over, yeah, but then keep the Hebrews at the top of it. Instead, what we find is that after these supposed apostles died, who they say were Hebrews, who do you find taking over? Who did the so-called apostles pass on the baton to? Not other Hebrews. Who? The church fathers, the Clementines, the Augustines, and the other ones like that, these other names that I can't remember now, right? That you learn so much of in the Christian church. Well, a little bit, but you heard them enough to remember a name or two. These are who the apostles apparently passed on the baton to. Because the apostles weren't no Hebrews, starting no religion. The Romans started and the Greeks started the religion of Christianity, and they set up some fake apostles that came from a fake son of God. And after they did their work to deceive everyone and chase the Hebrews out, then now they passed it on to the church fathers who were not Hebrew Israelites. Okay, most of the imperial laws dealing with the Jews since the days of Constantine, and keep in mind that you don't find these church fathers like wreaking havoc on Satan's kingdom with all kinds of miracles and raising the dead and so on, like the apostles claim to have done and like Jesus claimed to have done. It became more ministerial or more formal in terms of clergy operation, and more strategic and more administrative and so on, right, in terms of claiming new territories by instituting the Christian religion in those territories and taking them over. That's what it became like. It didn't become like, oh, this new Apostle Paul, and everybody would say, oh, this church father, yeah, he learned right from the Apostle Paul and right from the Apostle Peter, and he's on fire, man, and Holy Ghost is dropping anywhere. Where do you read that the church fathers were doing this, that, and whatever, and Holy Ghost was dropping in the church services in the different lands that they went to take over and conquer? No, they were conquering land for money and power. When was the last time you heard the Pope get up and he's speaking in tongues and teaching and speaking in tongues and all that kind of stuff? I've never heard him do that. I'm not saying he hasn't done it, but you notice that we got this Pentecostal experience from them. We're speaking in tongues of the Pentecostal churches, and we don't hear the Catholic bishops speaking in tongues and the Pope speaking in tongues. Think of it. Think of it. Okay, let me skip some of this information. Most of the imperial laws dealing with the Hebrews since the days of Constantine are found in the Latin Codex Theodosianus. Are found in the Latin Codex Theodosianus. You pronounce it properly yourself. 438, and in the Latin and Greek Code of Justinian 534. Some of the relevant decrees in these codes include prohibitions against making proselytes. Right? You see that? Prohibit the Hebrews from making proselytes. Why? Because Christianity was a religion of its own that rose up alongside what the Hebrews were doing when they're in their synagogues trying to teach themselves and their children about the laws of Moses that they need to continue keeping. That didn't include no worship to Jesus Christ. So because they didn't want the Hebrews who were spitting out against this new religion that was spreading like wildfire in the Roman Empire, and people were like, yeah, you make a point, because if they're telling us that this new Christian religion under our new emperor and so on is saying that we need to worship Jesus and he's the Son of God, then you must be right, because you're telling me and you're showing me that the prophets didn't worship no Son of God either. So people become proselytes, right, or convert. So in order to stop this damaging threat to Christianity, laws were passed to prohibit the Hebrews from continuing to do their thing and making proselytes or converting people by proper teaching of the law of Moses, which is really the law of the Most High, because Moses did not have his own law. It's the law of the Most High, and the Most High gave the laws to Moses and say, roll this out to the people, right? So you see how this Jesus stuff comes into the picture, the Son of God? We've just become so used to the law of Moses, and I'm not saying it's necessarily, I mean, yeah, of course we're going to continue to say, but I'm just trying to show you that it brings the Most High down to the level of man. And later on, a son of God can be introduced. Because when we think of the law of Moses, we think of a man. And now people start cursing the law of Moses. No, it's the law of the Most High, the law of the Creator, the law of the God of Israel. It's his law. It's not Moses' law. Right? And so they were prohibited from making proselytes, from doing intermarriage, owning slaves. Slave labor was very common at that time. And from holding, the Hebrews were prohibited from holding any esteemed position in the Roman state. Now, if they were such powerful men that were working miracles and so on, the apostles, and they had spearheaded this new Christian religion sent from God through his so-called son, Jesus, wouldn't they have some esteemed position in the Roman state? No, what we find is that it's the Romans who had the esteemed positions. And we see their names later on after they phase out the apostles through the apostle period to now being known as the church fathers, the apostolic fathers. Those were the ones who had the esteemed positions in the Roman state, right? Because they had worked hard at building a new religion that was going to unify Rome from some of the different struggles and economic problems that Rome was having, right? They were also prohibited from building new synagogues and testifying against Orthodox Christians in court. You see that? They were prohibited from building new synagogues. So the Christian mobs, like I pointed out before, history shows that they burnt down, broke down, destroyed the Hebrew synagogues, right? To make it more difficult for the Hebrews to come together and to teach their stuff and to, they were fighting against the Hebrews. And now laws were passed saying you cannot rebuild those things. Why? Because these other people were building a Christian religion and they didn't want the Hebrews to continue their way of life. They wanted to break it down, get rid of it, because it's a threat to this new cult religion. All right, this other website, Semitic Controversies.blogspot.ca, very long. I'll try to post up the link again too, right? This one is entitled The Jew as Subversive, the Excerpta Valesiani on the Jews. The Excerpta Valesiani is the name given to two fragmentary pieces of an unknown historical work of works that was probably written around the year 390. Yeah, brother, it's unknown. Hold on. They are usually published as part of Ammianus Marcellinus Rerum Gestarum. These are probably Latin words. Following the Renaissance era, editor of Marcellinus' work, Henry Valois, adding them as an appendix to the edition he brought out. In spite of the unknown authorship of the fragments, classicists have been able to determine that they are to be treated as reliable sources of information, and as such they are frequently used as textual evidence on Rome's Ostrogothic period. So there might have been unsure of certain details at first, but we were able to eventually tie it down to somewhere about the year 390. And so it's going to go on and show some stuff here now. It's the second fragment that is of interest to us as it refers to the activities of the Hebrews, as it refers to the activities of the Jews during the rule of Theodoric the Goth in Italy. All right. So I didn't know of this Theodoric before, so I just quickly looked him up. I'm going to look more into his history, but basically Theodoric the Great was king of the Ostrogoths from 454 to 526 AD. That's a few hundred years after Christ and the apostles, and probably about 200 years after, 150, 200 years or so after the Council of Nicaea with Constantine. From Wikipedia, it's saying Theodoric is a widespread Germanic given name. First attested in the 5th century, it became widespread in the Germanic-speaking world, not least due to its most famous bearer, Theodoric the Great, king of the Ostrogoths, which I just mentioned. All right, so that's not part of the article here. I just want to say something about Theodoric, who they call the Great. Then, so this document that I'm dealing with here it says, then Theodoric made Eutharchus consul and celebrated triumphs at Rome and at Ravenna, if I'm saying that properly, or Ravenna, I don't know, Ravenna. This Eutharchus was an excessively rough man and an enemy to the Catholic faith. All right, so you see, enemy to the Catholic faith. So it's not everyone who always agreed with what they were doing, right, in Rome. It's not everyone who agreed. Some of their own people didn't like it. That's why I told you in the last video, video 11, that not only were the Hebrews persecuted and fought against and killed because they didn't want to give in and so had to flee Rome. It's not that Christians were, being touched. It's the Hebrews. But everyone who was resisting what Rome was doing with this new religion was also fought against, right? So here you're seeing that this man was an enemy of the Catholic faith. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. After this, while Theodoric was remaining at Verona, through fear of the neighboring peoples, strife arose between the Christians and the Jews. Again, I'm showing you that there's a difference between the Christians and the Jews. The Christians and the Hebrews, right? Right? And of course, some people would have converted and proselytes made from other peoples, right? That come into this. So they're probably using Jews loosely here, right? We know the Hebrews would have been in this as well too. And so what they're saying is that, what they're showing here is that you have the Christian religion alongside the Jews trying to keep their laws, the laws from the Old Testament, right? It's a total separate religion. If the Jews started this religion of Christianity on the day of Pentecost, why is it coming up in history more and more that there is a Christian religion alongside what the Jews were doing? It would more show consistently in history that the Jews started Christianity. But it only shows that in shallow readings that the Christian pastors take who never read any further thing in history. And I know because I was being groomed, so to speak, to become a pastor, Bible college and all kinds of stuff, right? And I wasn't interested in the first thing I hear about a topic when I was teaching Sunday school and preaching, youth service preaching Sundays or whatever. The first thing I heard about a topic was it for me, and it would remain like that until the rest of my preaching life, until I'm old and getting ready to die and so on. That's how a lot of times, of course, not all pastors are like that. I'm not saying that, right? But a lot of them are. And some of them who are starting to read now are only doing it because of people like you and I who are starting to say these things and talk about certain other topics as well in history. And they're being forced to read and study. And the ones of them who don't want to come back and tell you that it's true what you're saying and history shows the stuff, so this and that could not have been true and whatever, they just cut you off. They don't want to deal with you anymore. They tell their people, stay away from that person. Stay away from that brother or that sister. They're into false doctrine. That's how they do it. Because they don't want to change their Christian beliefs. Because they think it's right. They don't understand it was created by someone who didn't love the God of, by people who didn't love the God of Israel. So there was strife that arose between the Christians and the Hebrews and the Jews of the city of Ravenna, Italy. Accordingly, the Jews being unwilling to be baptized, see that? If the Hebrews started the Christian religion on the day of Pentecost and 3,000 souls were baptized that day as Peter was preaching and so on the day of Pentecost, that the Christian church says they want to get back to their roots. If they started on baptizing people, why is it that even while the Hebrews, according to some of the early history I'm showing, resisted this stuff, why is it that a couple hundred years later, the Jews are still refusing and resisting to be baptized? They're resisting baptism. So accordingly, the Jews or the Hebrews, being unwilling to be baptized, often in the sport through the holy water that was offered to them. See, they're pushing this Christian religion on them, pushing this pagan water ritual on them, right? Offered them this holy water. The Hebrews instead threw the water into the river. They didn't want anything to do with it. Just like they didn't want anything to do with this new Christian religion back at the start of it. So they were forced out of Rome. They had to run into different parts of Arabia and so on, into Atlas Mountains, ended up into different parts of Africa, where we stayed until the Arabs came and took us into the Arab slave trade, and then the Europeans came and took us over into the Western slave trade or into the Atlantic slave trade, and now we're in the Jamaica, Canada, America, the different Caribbean islands, Haiti, Bahamas, everywhere, Brazil, all over, right? You see that? We resisted and so had to run. And here, in about 4 to 500 AD, they are still resisting all of this Catholic Christian religion stuff, right? They didn't want anything to do with. So now, you have to think to yourself, if they were so much resisting this religion, and we're being told that they resisted it, if it were to be, if the Hebrews, because I said the Hebrews didn't have a chance to write their own records, we're getting the records of the conquerors, like they say the conqueror or the victor writes history, right? Just like I'm reading to you from documents now written by the conquerors, right? If the Hebrews then had written their own history, it would then say things to let us know, just like they're saying here, it would then say to us, we resisted their holy water, but we kept to the God of Israel. We kept we resisted their baptism. We resisted their son of God, their demi-god, Jesus and all, but we kept to the law of Moses. That's the kind of stuff that would be said if the Hebrews had written their own records. But I tell you, as they were being chased at the point of the sword and had to flee the Holy Land, the Hebrews didn't stop to write and publish no book like they set up some publishing companies. You know how long that would have taken? Do you know how expensive it would have been and how much time it would have taken to write scrolls at that time? No. When this stuff was going on, the Hebrews didn't stop and turn around to publish no book called no New Testament. They didn't have time to stop and publish books. Oh, we have to flee now because they're trying to kill us, but we're publishing this New Testament book to let you know that you should worship Jesus and believe in him because he's the Son of God. No, Hebrews were on the run. They didn't have time to stop and publish books. That's why we don't get the history of the Hebrews. You notice when you go to the library that a lot of the writings you're getting and a lot of these histories are being brought to us by authors, by Jewish authors, Israeli Jewish authors, Jewish rabbis, right? It's being brought to us by historians that were not Hebrew Israelites. Catholic Encyclopedia that you see a lot of this stuff that you cannot piece together is not written by Hebrew Israelites. It's written by those who were against them, right? So they threw the holy water in the river. Because of this, the people were fired with anger and without respect for the king, for Eutharchus, or for Peter, who was bishop at the time. So this is apparently not the same Peter that was Peter the apostle, but another Bishop Peter. They rose against the synagogues, you see that again, and presently set them on fire. So again, what we find is that the Christians in the Christian pagan religion became infuriated. They became angry and once again destroyed the synagogues of the Jews. Why? Two different religions, and they were fighting against, right, the Jews and their synagogues, breaking them down and so on. And this same thing happened in similar affair at Rome. You see that? Similar thing happened at Rome. They're showing you this was just normal common stuff. Get rid of these Hebrews with their Israelite God. Get rid of them. We're going to take over. We've got Christianity from the Son of God that came from heaven. Presently, the Jews hastened to... okay, there's some more here. I'll just skip that. Okay. Okay, let me read a little piece more of this. Now, clearly the author of the second fragment is highly partisan as a Catholic Christian who ascribes to the idea of Saint Cyprian that there can be no salvation outside the Holy Roman Church. You see that? That's what they're telling their people in their empire. But no Hebrew Israelite is saying that and teaching that. And thus to him, the different belief systems of the Arian Christians. Now that Arian is A-R-I-A-N, different from A-R-Y-A-N. Arian was just a man. I'll give some information on him another time. But look it up. Look up the Arian heresy. And thus to him, the different belief systems of the Arian Christians weren't even Christian, but rather a form of heretical devil worship. You see that? So there's different fightings within this new religion of Christianity that had different groups in it. And Rome's job was to unify them. That's what Constantine was doing. They were trying to all unify them, and they gathered the bishops at the Council of Nicaea to agree on one thing. We're going to agree on who this Jesus is, what was his nature, and so on. Is he just pure man, or is he God and man mixed together, come from heaven and impregnated Mary, and so on, right? That was what was going on. And so you're hearing them saying that these different parts of the Christian religion, the different groups, which today we would call denominations and so on with their own different beliefs, are nothing more than heretical devil worship. I told you already that the first Christian services were held in pagan temples. Right? So you got warring and fighting going on within the Christian religion, the Christian movement itself, right? Nothing about no Hebrews here in this, because the Hebrews wouldn't have been defending no Jesus, Son of God. They got the law of Moses. It also documents one of the earliest attempts by Christians to baptize Jews as professors of error, telling the Jews that they are in error by not believing the Christian teachings, and that they need to be baptized, but they don't believe it, and that they don't believe in Jesus, Son of God, right? They call the Jews professors of error. Same thing I was called by the pastor at the time of the church that I came out of, right? Telling me I'm a heretic. It's the same thing here, professors of error, right? By giving them holy baptismal water, possibly also, or blessed oil, and thus probably attempting to show them the right path in Christ. And that's what the Christians do to this day. They want to show the Jews for Jesus now. So try to show Jews the right way, even though they don't know who the real Jews are. Right? So it's showing here, history is showing that there was a separate, distinct operation going on called the Christian religion from what the Israelites would do when they were trying to keep the law of Moses. And because they resisted this at every point, their synagogues were burnt down. They were forced by the sword to accept or die, right? Because they were professors of error by professing the law of Moses, which was really the law of the Most High. All right, and as I mentioned, Arian is different. The Arian I mentioned there, the Arian Christians that the fightings was going on with, is from Arian. It's Arian. I forgot this other guy's name and his title, but it's A-R-I-A-N. That's his name. And so this dictionary, Encyclopedia Britannica. No, this is definition of Arian by Merriam-Webster. Definition of Arian says it's of or relating to Arius or his doctrines, especially that the Son, talking about the Son of God, is not the same substance as the Father, but was created as an agent for creating the world, right? And so that's where we get this whole thing in John chapter 1 that Jesus created the world, the Son created the world, and so on, right? And so all this kind of stuff here I knew of in the Christian church, but didn't understand, right? I didn't understand why all this fighting was going on. And I read it so much I was in Bible school, I just didn't understand. Now I'm understanding. The Arian heresy from Wise Geek at wisegeek.com. The Arian heresy can be a difficult thing to understand by individuals who have not been raised reciting the Nicene Creed or in a Christian-based religion. Founders of the early Christian church, with the aid of Constantine, who was at the time not a practicing Christian. You see that? thought it essential that the nature of God and the belief in God be clarified. Most important was identifying and defining the divinity of Christ, while many believed that Jesus was Son of God and shared his essence, a concept. Let me just stop reading that part there. Basically, what they're saying and showing there is that the founders of the Christian religion, along with Constantine and so on, they were deciding and fighting over this whole thing of who Jesus is and so on. Showing again that this Christian religion is not something that the Hebrews were dealing with, right? Because it would have been simple. If the Hebrews had made Christianity that powerful and strong and big and whatever, they would have clarified the stuff, right? Why the Hebrews were known to be clear on their stuff, because the Most High had already been clear with them all the time in telling them in his commandments how to live, what to do, what not to do, and so on, right? So they were used to clarity in terms of instructions and following the Most High. That's why they say Torah, instead of meaning law, really means instructions, right? Why it's dealing with clarity. Instructions, if I instruct you in something, then I'm attempting to make things clear to you at least, right? Instead of just telling you to do it. I'm giving you instructions, so you get step-by-step instructions, clarifying things, instructions. Torah doesn't necessarily mean law, they said. Like the Christians think it means instructions. It's teaching. Teaching to make you understand. So wouldn't the Hebrews, if they started Christianity on the day of Pentecost, have taught and given clear teaching on who Jesus is? It will be clear. If Jesus was the Son of God, who he was, and that he was born of the Holy Spirit or born of a man and woman, it would have been clear. Because the Hebrews would have simply been preaching that stuff day after day, day after day, day after day, and nobody would have been wondering why. Or would have been wondering what is his nature, because they would have been talking about his nature all along. All along. Because somebody at some point would have been asking, if this Jesus really came from the Spirit, from God, impregnated Mary, you don't think a ton load of people all along would have been asking all these apostles, and even asking Joseph, you don't hear anything about him. Oh, you aren't the Father? Wouldn't they have been saying, oh, the Spirit impregnated him and all? It's ridiculous, right? People would have been asking all along, oh, where's this Jesus? I want to just touch him, right? Instead, you find that they only want to touch him when he's working miracles. If I was living at that time when Jesus is said to have come, I wouldn't necessarily wait to be sick just to want to touch him to be healed. Just the mere fact that he comes from God, whether he was born fully of man and woman, and then the Spirit was in him, or he was born of woman and Spirit, impregnating Mary, just the fact that he came out of heaven and he is God, or he is the actual physical Son of God, literal Son of God. I just want to touch this. Pardon me for saying, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful, I just want to touch this creature. I want to see him, I want to touch him. It's like with this fake alien stuff that they're talking about, that they're going to scare the world with to lead you on to Satan. It's like if people really saw aliens, wouldn't they want to touch them? Yeah, why? Because you want to know everything. Right? Just like when they captured, okay, maybe I probably won't bother say that part. Okay, so now let me read the scripture and close this off now. Acts chapter 2. And when the day of Pentecost was fully come, they were all with one accord in one place. Who was there? If you read the rest of this chapter and Acts chapter 1, you can see it was the Israelites. They were the ones who were there, not these other people with Constantine and his people, or the Caesars, or the Herods, or the Pilates, and so on. Not these other people who were starting this Christian religion. Right? They're telling you that it's the Hebrews were there. They were gathered together in one accord in one place. And suddenly there came a sound from heaven as of a rushing mighty wind, and it filled all the house where they were sitting. And there appeared unto them cloven tongues as of fire, sat upon each of their heads, and so on. And they started speaking tongues to go through quicker. And there was dwelling at Jerusalem Jews, means the Judaites, or, from Judah, devout men out of every nation under heaven. I'll stop there. You see what it says? Devout men. I lost that. Hold on. Devout men out of every nation under heaven. And so we're being told proper understanding of this is that devout men out of every nation are the Hebrews who were scattered in these different lands, right? And so they came for this feast, right? At in Acts chapter 2. Devout men. Now, if Constantine and the Caesars and so on are setting up this religion and who that got passed on later to the early church fathers to operate it and so on, they certainly weren't devout men, so it's not talking of them, right? Because devout would mean the people who knew the law of Moses, right? So what they are telling you here is some really nice stuff to let you think this was stuff that God was doing through the Hebrews. But we can see from the other lessons I pointed out and from some of the history now that's coming out that they're only using nice stories to bring off the deception. As we can tell from the Holy Ghost outpouring here in Acts chapter 2, I already showed from scripture from Joel chapter 2, it is impossible for God to have given Holy Ghost in Acts chapter 2. That is fake. It's going to take too much time to do it. Go back, search my video. I can't remember which video. It might have been lesson 4, 5, or 6. Probably 4 or 5. It shows that this Holy Ghost Pentecost day of speaking in tongues stuff is fake. Just a quick summary of it here. I'll just say that the way Joel talks about it, right? And there are other scriptures that I found afterwards too. So I'll have to make another video and talk about the speaking in tongues stuff another time. Is that after the Most High rescues us and saves us and has satisfied our needs, then the Spirit will be poured out. But what this is showing here is that the Spirit is poured out and people still have needs. Remember, Ananias and Sapphira still had needs. They wanted money, so they couldn't give all the money. After their needs are met, the prophet says the Spirit will be poured out. But this is pouring out the Spirit, and people still have so much needs. Afterwards, even today, we still have needs. We're broke. The Israelites were living under curse. He shall lend to thee, but you won't lend to him. Right? And we were told in the Christian church that this was unique stuff, speaking in tongues. But enough of us have already found in history that people were speaking in tongues before the day of Pentecost. But the Christian pastors and the Christian Bible colleges don't tell you anything about that. Why? Look up the cult of Bacchus. They were filled with the Spirit speaking in tongues. That was probably 200 or 300 years in the time of the Greeks, right? Before Christ is said to have come and before this day of Pentecost. How come people are speaking in tongues then, and the Christian churches are telling you this was a unique experience, never happened before in history? This concludes this lesson. Thanks for listening.